Hey, it's Kevin Switch here. Welcome to another tip, trick, or technique session. In this session, we're going to have a look at gain staging again, but this time we're going to have a look at doing gain staging using the pre-gain control in Cubase. Now, the reason for this is because it was asked a few times by a few people that watched my other gain staging videos of whether you can use the pre-gain control instead. And it was also suggested by somebody that my approach was a bit complicated and that I should use pre-gain and it's a lot simpler. So I'm open to any suggestions. I'm open to proving whether it works or not. And I mean, of course, it is going to work. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. And I have told people that it will work. It was just a different way than what I was doing it. So if you want to see my other way, check out my other videos. But otherwise, this one here, we're going to use the pre-gain control. And you know, as I said, I'm open to suggestions. So if there's a better way for me to do things, then I'm going to try it out and I'm going to see whether I like it or not. And then I'll choose the approach I like because everybody does things differently. Everybody has a different workflow. As long as you get the right results, that's the main thing. But I'm open to try new techniques because that's how we adapt and that's how we learn as we move through the process. So let's get into it and check it out. All right, so we've got a mix here, and I've actually sort of backed this mix up so that I could butcher it. It was already a mix that was in progress, and I wanted to back out a lot of the changes, but obviously not impact my mix that I'm currently working on. But I also wanted to simplify it a little bit here. So I just got the mix bus turned down, just so we don't blow ourselves out of the water here. So you'll see I've got plugins on here that are doing various things, but we're not really going to pay too much attention other than where it comes to gain staging. I've got some panning, but what I've also done is I've zeroed all the meters. So if I was to play this mix right now, it would sound horrible because I have zeroed all the meters. So we've just got lots of tracks and they're all feeding into groups of buses here, and then they're all feeding into a mix bus. Right, so if we go over to our project window here, the first place I obviously start when I come to gain staging is with the tracks themselves. So when we open this up, we've got lots of tracks, audio, and they all come in different forms and different volumes, as you can see, different levels here and there. Now, in the other process that I did the old way and the way I still do it today at the moment is that I would have a look at my plugin here. And just a reminder, if you haven't watched my other videos, the reason I do it with this plugin is because this plugin here is an analog emulator. So it's emulating analog equipment, which means that if it's too low, it's not going to get much of the analog character of the plugin. If it's too high, it's going to start to distort and get that analog distortion. Now, of course, that may be what you actually want, but assuming that you don't and you just want to get the character of the plugin, but you want it all nice, no distortion, everything else, I try to target my signal to sit here at 0 VU. Now, if you look at the setting on here with this plugin, its default is -18 dB is 0 VU. Now, you could change that setting, but what I don't really know is if you change the setting, yes, you're changing the meter, but you're changing how the plugin reacts. I don't know the answer to that, and I haven't actually tested it. So I just assumed that no, it won't change it. It'll change the meter, but it won't change how it reacts. So I just leave it at its default setting, and that's where I target. So obviously in this case, when I'm adjusting my clip gain at the track level, I'm trying to get 0 VU on this meter, roughly, give or take. You know, it's not going to be exact because obviously audio fluctuates. All right, but what I don't want is I don't want it peaking and stuff like that. So I'm going to target around the 0 VU on all the tracks and get the character of this plugin out. Okay, so the way I would do it in my previous videos was that I would adjust this setting here, which is clip gain. All right, which is basically just turning the volume down, or if I push it, I can push it up. All right, so I'll put it back to 0. So I still like this control, and there's a good chance that going forward I will still use this control because it's just there. It's very simple to use. But in true respect of this video, I'm going to do the entire thing in pre-gain. Okay, so where is the pre-gain? All right, so from my understanding, there's a few places we can find it. If you're a Cubase user, you will know that they have the settings in lots of different places. So if we're in our project window here and I open up the channel settings control with the E button there, you'll see we have gain here. So here's our pre-gain control here. We can turn it up and we can turn it down. And using a mouse, it is it is very sensitive and very hard to control a little bit. Alternatively, you can go across to the channel strip setting here and you have the control here. Now, keep in mind, these are not different controls. They're the same. Okay, so I've just turned that up. If I switch over here, you'll see it's turned up. If I turn that down, switch over here, you'll see it's turned down. So they're the same settings. They're just presented in two different places in two different forms. Now, another place to find it is over in our mix window. So if we're in our mix window here, in our racks, you'll see there's a setting here called pre. If we open that up, you'll see that we have our gain control. Right, so that is basically this section here or this section here, just presented here on the mix window. So depending on where you prefer to work, you can find the pre-gain setting there. Now, if you don't see this pre option here in your rack, and you can find it here under racks. So if you go to racks, you can display whatever sections you want, or you can remove them. So if I untick pre, suddenly it's gone. I can't see it. So if I tick it and it comes back, then it's visible to me. And obviously tapping on it shrinks it and shows it up. Now, obviously you've got phase and filters here as well, but we're only concentrating on pre-gain. Right, so if we start by opening up this virtual plugin on this window. Now, if you don't have plugins or you want to put a plugin on, you could put a meter on here, or you could just look at this meter and target somewhere respectable. Now, see this line here? This is what we don't want. We don't want that. We want something reasonable down here. Okay, so if we just start with this track here, so you can see how it's moving the meter here. It's not extremely loud. It's quite soft actually. So we might decide to add a bit of gain to this. Now obviously we don't want that. That's distorting. You can hear that distortion that I'm talking about. Obviously you can use that as an effect if you wish, but that is not the purpose of this. Okay, so we've got the red light. It's still clipping. So it's going to be hard to get it to 0 because there's an entire drum kit here. It's very dynamic. But you can see we've boosted a little bit here. And then obviously now our meters at 0, we're going up. So, you know, we're a little bit high on the meters now, but we're hitting our plugin right the way we want to hit the plugin. And I would do that across all the tracks here. Now, in this case here, let's go through a couple more. So here we have a little bit of a difference with the kick because I've got 3 kick drums and I'm actually feeding them into a kick bus so that I only have to do an effect on one channel instead of doing EQing and everything on each individual kick drum. I'm just going to balance them the way I want into here. And I'm going to do that first with the faders just to get the right balance. So I'm going to say that my kick in is my main kick. That's the one I like the most. And then I'm going to blend in some kick out. I'm just going to turn these 2 down. And then I might kick in this kick sub. All right, so let's assume that's the sound I'm going for. I've got these 3 kick tracks balanced and I like the way they sound. So now I'm going to open this plugin up and I'm going to have a look at how it's getting hit. So it's not going berserk there, so we might push this up a little bit. And we're going to repeat that process through all of these. So again, we've got 3 snare tracks, same thing. We're hitting this snare drum bus. Okay, and I'm only doing these ones here in a bus because, as I said, I blend them together to create one instrument. So that's how I use buses in this case. If they're 3 different instruments and I want to EQ them and compress them differently, then I will not bus them, I'll keep them separate. That's excluding the main bus drum kit. All right, but where it's an instrument that I really want to blend these different microphones together and then work on it as one snare drum, that is where I will do this bus, the same as that kick there. So again, I'm going to take my snare top as my main element because that's always the one that I like the most. Then I'm going to add some of this snare bottom in, which is usually that thin rattly sound. And then there's the snare compressor one here. All right, so let's say we've got that where we want it. And again, we're going to open our plugin. Okay, so we've pushed the gain up a little bit. Let's say we like that. And then we're going to follow on and we're going to keep doing all of these ones here. All right, we're going to do each track. We're going to look at the meter and we're going to balance it as we want to there. So if you wanted to use the meter on the actual track here because you don't have a plug-in, you just want to see what you want to do. At the moment, this is, well, by default, it's set to post fader or post panner. So it's taking all of the signal there, but if we actually put it to input, and let's turn that on there, let's get rid of these, whoops. So we can see our meter here, like if I turn that down to nothing, you'll still see where it's registering, and even if I go up, because I've got it set to input now. So we're basically mimicking this here. And to me, this is a good spot here, okay? We're not too low on the meter, we're not down here, and we're not up here in the red or the orange. We've got a bit of buffer up the top and a lot of room down the bottom to move as well. So it gives us a lot of play with the fader here. So If you're not using analog plugins and that, you can use the same gain processing and just set it to here. So just set your meter there to input, and then you can switch it back to post panner after. So you'll see how high it is now, which is obviously too high, but that's not the input. Okay, so that's us now coming out of this. So if I now drop this, now the meter drops. All right, so but let's put it back to 0. All right, so let's just quickly whip through all of these and just set these as something. Now, obviously with toms, you're going to want to find tom hits. Now, with something like hats, I may not push the gain up. You'll see where that's sitting there. Now, I could obviously push that a lot. So I may do it. It depends. In this case here, I'll do it. But a lot of the time I may not, because what happens is that with hi-hats, generally I don't want a lot in there, if any. So I would end up just pulling the fader down really low anyway, because of that gain. So in this case here, I may not put that gain because it's not going to happen too much. Now again, we've got our ambience here, which is all these tracks here are bust to this track. Okay, so let's say we like that balance there. Then again, we're going to come in here and I'm going to do the gain on the bus. So in this case here, that might have been a little bit loud, so we might drop the gain. All right, so we move along to our bass. And then we keep going. That's not bad. That's pretty good too. Okay, so this one's a little bit hot. I'm going to drop it down. All right, move on to the next one. Maybe drop it just a little bit. The only thing I don't like is they're very sensitive. I mean, I'm sure there's a fine way to do it, but just generally it's very sensitive. All right, so we go along and we just keep going. We do pretty much every track here. All right, now let's say we've done all of our tracks. They're all nicely gain stage now going into our plugin. Now our next step here is that what I would do now is I would start to mix it. So in the case of here, let's say we want to just quickly do all of this. So I'm going to solo my drums. And now I want to mix my drums. All right, so let's get some of our main elements in here. And I just want to get the volume down on some of these because they're obviously very loud. So this, keep in mind, this is a very rough mix. I'm just doing an example here. I'm not actually really mixing. All right, so there's our drums. Let's say our drums are now mixed. We've got all our faders the way we want. They're nicely mixed. Now I'm going to bring in, I might bring in my bass. All right, so let's say that's where we want that. And then we move along and I'm going to now add in my guitar. Okay, so let's say that's an example of a mix. We've got this all mixed now. And our next step is that all of our tracks are mixed together. They're sounding good. And we're going to check our bus level now. So now we come to our bus. So all of our drum tracks are feeding into this drums bus. All of our bass tracks are feeding into this bass. All our guitars are feeding into this guitar track. So I want to make sure that these aren't being hit too hot. So we saw the drums there obviously peaked. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to drop our pre-gain on the bus. Now you can see a boost there when we have the tom fill, so we might find that I've got the toms a little bit too loud. We could balance that out, but generally as it's playing, we're sitting in a nice spot there. So now I'm going to move across to my bass and see how that's sitting. Yeah, it's pretty good, but you could boost it a little bit if you want. Get it right in that 0 spot. And then our guitars, maybe a tiny bit hot. And we would do the same for our percussion. I wouldn't do it for effects because obviously we're only blending in a little bit of effects here. Now, if we liked our mix before, we need to compensate for these gain adjustments that we've just done because I haven't moved these faders. So what I've in theory done is I have changed the relationship between the drums, bass, and guitar. So in theory, the drums have gone down 5.4 dB here. So to keep it the way it was before, in theory, I would have to pull that up 5.4 dB. Now, I don't really want to do that because that's going to put this fader in a silly place. But you could do a rough calculation because in theory, what you should do is you could drop the fader of the bass and the guitar down by 5.4 dB to match. But then I have pushed both of these up. Well, sorry, I've pushed that one down by 1.5 and I've pushed that up by 1.5. So you could sit there and calculate how that should be because that's 1.5 up, that's 5.4 down. So let's say we drop this by 4 dB. Something like that. But anyway, what I would do is I would just rebalance these by ear. And you could keep them, so let's say, all right, the drums are a little bit loud. Let's drop it down. Get it down to a nice spot. And then we'll bring our guitars in. Now, obviously I've skipped over the percussion here, but the same process would apply to the percussion. And obviously, as I said, I wouldn't touch the effects bus here because that's just reverbs and we just leave them sitting as they are. Now, each of these then feeds into this mix bus. Now, I don't actually have one of these plugins on the main mix bus here. So I don't have a meter because I only have that and a few other plugins. So in this regard here, how about we switch this over to input and we'll have a look at what it's doing on the input. So that's not too bad, but let's say it's a little bit, maybe it's a little bit higher. You want to bring it down a tiny bit. So the one thing that this doesn't do is it doesn't actually change the meter itself. So the meter is still at is still peaking and it's set to input. So the pre-gain doesn't seem to affect that. Now technically it does, but it's not showing it. Which is, I guess, a little bit annoying in that regard, because I would have liked to have seen what the pre-gain did to this. So really, in a perfect world, I would put a meter on here, and so in this case here, let's just put this VMT meter. I'm just going to drag it up there. Set to -18. Alright, so I might drop it down a little bit. So we're obviously still peaking a little bit. That's not too bad at the moment. It's obviously a very dynamic mix at the moment, so. Alright, so we've dropped a bit of gain there. Let's put our meter back. And then we've got our output then. From then on, we obviously, as I said, that's turned down. So there you go, there's gain staging in Cubase using the pre-gain control. So let me know in the comments, what did you think about it? Which approach do you prefer? Watch my other videos, check it out and see which one you like better. Which one would you go and do in your mixes? Which one do you understand better? Which one makes more sense to you and your workflow? So check it out. I'm going to see how this goes for a while. I'm going to adapt it into my mixes and see whether I like it long term or not. And it could be a case of me using a combination. I may still use clip gain at the very start on the actual tracks, but move to the pre-gain control on the buses and things like that. So a little bit hard for me to tell at this stage, because I like to work with things over a period of time and then see which gels with me the best and then move forward with that. But let me know what you think of it and what you thought of the video. Hopefully it's been helpful. Don't forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Come on over to my website and check out all the stuff I've got. I've got a Facebook group going at the moment as well, which you can join up. And yeah, follow all my stuff. And hopefully this video has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.